Hi, my name's Amanda Davis, as Ken mentioned. I'm the project manager of the New York City LGBT Historic Sites Project. And, um, and we're just going to give a brief background on our project if you're not familiar with our work. Uh, our project is nearly 10 years old. We're a group of historic preservationists, and we document LGBTQ history where it happened throughout the city's 5 boroughs, with our earliest site dating to the 17th century. And this is a snapshot of the map from our website. You can filter the map in several ways, as you see on the left, and you can click on any pin to learn more about a range of diverse stories. And of course, that includes Irish history. And I just wanted to share a few examples from our website. You can go onto the website and dig deeper into all of these sites. So we start off here with the Grand Hotel at 31st and Broadway, where Irish poet Oscar Wilde stayed during his famed tour of America in 1882. The St. Pat's for All Parade in Queens, which we're going to hear more about tonight. The Friary at St. Francis of Assisi Church on 31st Street near Penn Station, where Father Michael Judge lived until his death on 9/11. And he's seen here in his role as chaplain of the New York City Fire Department. And our program title tonight, High Levels of Madness, was said by Father Michael to describe the hysteria confronting gay and lesbian groups who were trying to march in the Fifth Avenue St. Patrick's Day Parade in the 90s, which of course is the subject of tonight's talk. We also have the Greenwich Village residence of activist Robert Reiger, who was a member of the Irish Lesbian and Gay Organization, or ILGO, and who we'll hear more about tonight. And we also have the Rising Cafe, an Irish pub on Fifth Avenue in Park Slope, Brooklyn, that opened in 1996 and closed in 2003. And it was co-owned by Irish immigrant Rena Blake, who was also a member of ILGO. You can also explore LGBTQ New York through a variety of thematic collections we've created on our website. These are just 9 examples to give you an idea of the kinds of stories that we've mapped so far. And then another aspect of our work is to expand the number of LGBTQ historic sites on the National Register of Historic Places. And the National Register is the federal government's honorary list of historic places that tell the story of America. And for a long time, the list represented only a small slice of a much broader and diverse story. And through our project's efforts, 11 sites and 1 historic district, that's Greenwich Village, now interpret LGBTQ history on the National Register, and we're currently working on 2 more. And some of the other ways we make this history accessible is through free self-guided walking tours available on the Bloomberg Connects app, trolley tours of Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, and plaque unveilings like this one at Julius's Bar in Greenwich Village, commemorating a gay rights action that took place at the bar in 1966. And a lot of people know us best through our Instagram feed, where we share snippets of the city's LGBTQ history on almost a daily basis. And these are some of those examples. And now I want to turn to tonight's talk, High Levels of Madness, the fight for LGBTQ inclusion at the St. Patrick's Day Parade. This is the first of 3 virtual programs we're hosting this fall as part of our intergenerational speaker series, The Historian and the Activist, Cross-Cultural LGBTQ New York. And we hope you'll join us for our second program on November 19th, From Lower Sida to the South Bronx, Puerto Rican LGBTQ Culture in New York City. And then our third program on December 3rd, Silence Equals Death, Reclaiming the Pink Triangle in AIDS-Era New York. And you can learn more and sign up on our events page. And we also want to take the time to thank Humanities New York with support from the National Endowment for the Humanities, whose action grant made this free series possible. And tonight's guest speakers, Emma Quinn is Assistant Professor and Learning and Curricular Services Librarian at St. John's University. She has an MA in Irish and Irish American Studies from NYU and an MLIS from Long Island University. Her research interests lie in the history of gender and sexuality in the Irish Catholic diaspora, with a focus on New York, as well as inclusive and accessible pedagogy. And Brendan Fay is an immigrant from Ireland and longtime resident of Astoria, Queens, where he lives with his husband, Tom Moulton. And he's a human rights activist and filmmaker whose employment as a Catholic high school teacher in Queens was terminated in 1991 for marching with the Irish Lesbian and Gay Organization, or ILGO, at the St. Patrick's Day Parade on Fifth Avenue. And for 25 years, the Irish LGBTQ group he founded, Lavender and Green Alliance, fought alongside others for the right to march openly in the parade, a fight that ended successfully in 2016. And during that time, Fay also founded the inclusive St. Pat's for All Parade in Queens, which celebrates its 25th anniversary in 2025. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Emma to get the talk started.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. So hi, everyone. My name is Emma Quinn, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about why I do this kind of research. And it really stems right from my own experiences growing up as the daughter of Irish immigrants who I'm also a lesbian. And so this project, this research that I do really is kind of a way of understanding the history of my kind of very specific niche community, and kind of having these generational conversations is something I find really important. Brendan was very kind when I reached out to him. He invited me to his house. He showed me so many pictures and talked about these memories. And that's why I'm really excited to have this conversation with him tonight. And I could talk about many things about this topic. There's so much to cover, as me and Brendan have talked about a lot. But what I want to focus on in my kind of brief time I have is the fact that both the queer community in New York and the Irish American community in New York love parades, and parades are a really essential part of these communities in very different ways. So I want to give you kind of an overview of how these two parades, the St. Patrick's Day Parade and the Pride Parade, have developed in kind of different ways based on each community, and how it becomes this important collision in 1991, which Brendan's going to talk about later. And so the St. Patrick's Day Parade in New York actually predates this country. The first New York St. Patrick's Day Parade was in the 1760s and was held by Irish soldiers fighting for the British Crown. So that's how long it's been part of the city. But in the 1830s and 1840s, there's a really important shift, and that has to do with the population of who is coming from Ireland. So before 1840, there's a relatively small Irish immigrant population, and they are religiously diverse. There's both Protestant and Catholic. They're mostly kind of what we consider like a merchant class. They're fairly well off, and they're not overwhelmingly Catholic in the way that we think of the Irish American Catholic community today. So what changes that? It's the famine in the 1840s. And I have this graph here. We can kind of get a scale of how many Irish immigrants come in those decades around the potato famine, so the 1840s and the 1850s. And that continues, right, to be high immigration after that. But this new generation that comes in the 1840s, 50s, and so on is much poorer. They are not skilled workers most of the time. They're doing roles like canal digging, railroad construction, domestic service for the women. And they generally are almost entirely Catholic. And so this is when we start seeing this Irish Catholic identity start to form in the city. Because in particular, New York City gets many Irish immigrants. In 1850, 40% of all foreign-born people in the United States were Irish, to give you an idea of how big that wave of immigration is. So if you could just go to the next slide, Amanda. Perfect. This wave of Catholic immigration, Irish Catholic immigration, it leads to this big increase in anti-Irish sentiment, which is spurned by harmful stereotypes, like those perpetuated by Thomas Nass in this political cartoon I have up on this slide. This was published in 1871, and it portrays an Irish man with simian, that means ape-like features, which was then, it is now, a common and harmful way to suggest that someone is uncivilized or savage. You can also see that the Irish person portrayed here is holding a whiskey bottle, sitting on a barrel of gunpowder, and wielding both a torch and a baton. which are there to suggest that he is a drunk, and B, violent, right? A source of instability, violence, might overthrow the government is kind of what this political cartoon is trying to suggest here. This is just one example. There's a lot that you can look at from this time period, but this kind of negative portrayal of Irish Catholics in New York and across the country is a really important part of the story. And the Ancient Order of Hibernians, which is this Irish Catholic fraternal organization that takes over the parade in the 1840s, they realize that they need to do some kind of PR damage control, basically. And so they start using the St. Patrick's Day parade, which again has been going on for almost 100 years at this point, as a display of Irish order and respectability. And so the illustration on the right shows the 1874 St. Patrick's Day parade. And you can see that it's almost like a military procession. Like, look how everyone is in a straight row. Look how everyone's in perfect uniform. It's this kind of grand display of how Irish people are very civilized and very orderly. And so that is really a strong contradiction from this political cartoon on the left that Thomas Nast drew. And so these are two different portrayals of Irishness. And what the Ancient Order of Hibernians is trying to do with this parade is to create this positive view of Irish America. And in Marion Casey's new book, The Green Space, she argues that that St. Patrick's Day as a whole plays a huge role in creating this integrated positive view of Irish Americans. These massive parades are part of that, right? The idea that they are these big displays of how great Irish Americans are. However, because the New York City St. Patrick's Day Parade became such a visual representation of Irish America, it also becomes a place of exclusion, where groups that do not fit in with that respectable middle class and Catholic Irish American identity are excluded. This is still apparent if you go onto their website today and read the marching rules, which includes requirements that all marchers wear business attire. There's a restriction on exactly how many flags, what banners, who can hold them, where in your group they have to be held. And there's a ban on all drinking, right? So you see that still today, there's this idea that the parade has to be orderly, it has to be respectable. And when we look at the Pride Parade, it is not created for that same purpose. So, man, if you could go to the next slide really quickly. Thank you. So the first Pride Parade arose out of different, but not entirely separate circumstances, which I think is kind of interesting. They're not the same, but you can kind of see similar ideas happening here. They're making statements with these parades. So the first New York City Pride Parade is called the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, and it was held to commemorate the first anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And so from its initial conception, Pride was inherently connected to activism. They were fighting not for respectability, but for legal and civil rights, right? So in 1970, homosexuality was still listed as a mental illness in the DSM-2, which is the reference used by most psychiatrists. It's right there alongside pedophilia. And so you can see that on the slide there. You can see that page from the DSM-2. Same-sex marriage would not be legalized in every state for 45 years after the first New York City Pride Parade. Therefore, while the St. Patrick's Day Parade became a place where the image of Irish America was negotiated, the Pride Parade was a protest for equal rights that embraced expression, freedom, and diversity amongst its marchers. So by the 1990s, Pride was also a hub for AIDS activist groups like ACT UP, who advocated for funding for AIDS treatment, research, and prevention. Not to get too, again, I've done a lot of work on AIDS, so I don't want to get too into the numbers, but over 100,000 people died of AIDS between 1981 and 1990, and almost a third of those deaths occurred in 1990. So you can think, right, as we're going into this 1991 ILGO St. Patrick's Day Parade thing, that AIDS story is really much still involved in this. So the Pride Parade in the 90s was a place of activism, celebration, and mourning, with lots of different groups marching for different reasons and championing different causes. Pride was not attempting to create a cohesive and orderly community image the way that the St. Patrick's Day Parade was. And so these two different ways of expressing identity with the Pride Parade and the St. Patrick's Day Parade are trying to combat harmful stereotypes. They're trying to change the way their communities are perceived. but in very different ways, where Pride is really championing expression and diversity, and St. Patrick's Day is continuing to really try for uniformity. And this uniformity becomes an issue when a group that did not fit within that narrow definition of Irish American Catholic identity tries to march, and that'll be ILGO. Could you go to the next slide? Thank you. All right, so I will leave it to Brendan to share his experiences of all the details. But for those less familiar with the story, I wanted to give you like a brief overview of events, just so you have an idea of what we're talking about as we move through this story. So we're going to start in 1990. That's when the Irish Lesbian and Gay Organization forms, and they march in the 1990 Pride Parade. The next year, they apply to march in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. They're denied due to lack of space, is the reason given. But eventually, with negotiations with the mayor, Dinkins, they're invited to march with an existing AOH chapter. The next year, they are officially banned, and the group that they marched with also gets banned, to give you an idea of this crackdown. And then over the next 10 plus years, ILGO protests at the parade, and they fight in court for the right to participate. Later on, you'll hear Brendan talk about the founding of the Lavender and Green Alliance in 1994, which is founded to celebrate the culture and history of LGBTQ plus Irish people. In 2000, Lavender and Green Alliance found St. Pat's for All, which is a radically inclusive parade in Sunnyside, Queens. And I'm coming from Woodside, which is right next to Sunnyside, so my neck of the woods. And then finally, in 2016, after years of pressure on many fronts, the Ancient Order of Hibernians allow Lavender and Green Alliance to march in the Fifth Avenue Parade. So that's the general story we're going to be talking about for the next 45 minutes or so. So to get Brendan, to give Brendan a chance to tell a little bit of his story, I'm curious what it was like at that first St. Patrick's Day Parade in 1991. So why did you decide to join ILGO, and what was that first parade like?
Right. Hello, and thanks very much. That's really really powerful like introduction. Thanks very much, Amanda. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having us. And it is amazing just to be here, to be telling our story is huge, and it means a lot. Right here, as you can see, like this image is the journey we've been on as Irish LGBT people in the city, and this is us actually representing ourselves in the Pride Parade. I call sort of a theme, I see it as overcoming LGBTQ discrimination in the St. Patrick's Parade. And in a way, that's the journey we've been on, even coming out, almost like the Irish, like our LGBT activists who organized their Pride Award in 1970, was to counteract and respond to the experience of invisibility and discrimination, and to be present with pride. By the way, the t-shirt I'm wearing, it's Gaelic, it says broad, which means pride. And it's quite the journey. So I often say there is more going on than just participating in parades. That is very much a journey of people's lives, of their hearts, of their feet, of their souls. Something very deep and very human is going on in this movement that I'm very glad to be proud of. All right, so we'll on to the next slide there, Amanda. And oh yeah, wow, the text didn't show up there. That's interesting. All right, maybe it's in the next one. Let's see. Yeah, actually, so the last one, believe it or not, basically what it said, if I'm not mistaken, was, what was the Ireland that I left in 1984? What was it like? It was a criminal offense to be gay in Ireland at that time. Homosexuality was decriminalized in Ireland in 1993, thanks to a campaign by David Norris, and who had become senator, and was signed into law by our first female president, Mary Robinson, in July 1993. The America I arrived in, you could be denied entry into the country simply for being perceived, never mind for actually being LGBTQ. So that's the reality of even what we're arriving in. So the next one. Yes. So my first real encounter, like what was the transforming was actually going to the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop and wandering into the bookshop around 1987, and in I go, and that's when I first met Craig Rodwell, who's the owner and founder from founded, sorry about that, that should be 1967, not 1976. And he encouraged, he basically said to me, he explained why he intentionally called his bookshop after Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde had been sentenced to 2 years hard labor simply for being a homosexual. And yet was an inspiring, uncompromising, almost gay man as well. And Craig then actually from under the counter handed me a book about Roger Casement, another gay man who was an Irish patriot executed in 1916. He then introduced me to this other guy, that's me on one side. I'm with Jesus Lebron, a Puerto Rican gay man, activist, who was also the manager at the bookshop. We became very good friends, lovers, and activists together for many, many years. And they encouraged me to put up a notice, which I did, on the bulletin board in the bookshop. And before we had the community center and all that, that's where people met and posted notices. People called me and we began to meet informally in a couple of bars and different places. ILGO, so we'll move on to the next slide there. Oh, my text didn't show up. That's all right. Okay. This is interesting. In the slides, I don't know what happened here. All right, so this is our ILGO group. We organized the first meeting of ILGO was in April 1990 in a Japanese restaurant. A small group met, formed ILGO, Irish Lesbian and Gay Organization. The second meeting and more public one was at the LGBT Community Center on 13th Street, was in May 1990. There was great excitement. It was a profound encounter. It was like there was really this great sense of belonging and connecting. And I think in the early days, we decided pretty much immediately with great excitement to march in the Pride Parade, and which we did that June 1990. People screamed on all sides of the New York Pride Parade. Some were like, wait now, you're Irish and queer, you're Irish, lesbian and gay. And depending on people's stereotypes about all of that. But for us, it was a very proud sort of moment and a great experience. And we had a piper, we paused every now and again and we danced along the way. And so after that June, some of us then actually went to Long Island and to that Pride Parade. It was really just a very positive, amazing moment. After that, we said, look, if we can be gay and lesbian, we did not use LGBTQ if we can be Irish in our New York City Pride Parade, maybe we could be gay and lesbian in our own Irish parade. In a way, I think it was, we were Irish. Like all immigrants, we felt we belong among our own community. And so this is us at one of the St. Patrick's Parade. That's me we began putting some of our signs in Irish. This one says, rights for gays now. Gay rights now. That's what that sign says. Cearta the gays anish. And of course, that's Anne Maguire, who's holding a tricolour flag, Turlock McNeilis, and so many others there along the way. All right, next slide. Here we are, yes, in our sunny outfits. Here we are in a Pride Parade in New York City. It just gives you a sense. It was a huge, beautiful, great sort of moment for us. Yeah. All right, we'll move on to the next one. So the St. Patrick's Parade in 1991, ILGO applied in October 1990 to march in the parade. Eventually, a response came back in January 1991 from the Ancient Order of Hibernians to say, sorry, we were at least acknowledging the application, but then saying, sorry, you won't be marching in the parade. There's a waiting list. You're on the waiting list and there's 40 groups in front of you. the story ended up in the New York Post front page, published by gay reporter Joe Nicholson, who had heard the story from Andy Hom, who was then a New York City human rights commissioner. And it became a big story. Mayor David Dinkins intervened and sought to resolve the situation so that ILGO could be in the parade. He offered to put all the resources of the city to the parade organizers, extend the parade by another hour, offer volunteer staff and extra funding and support. In the end, the organizers, the AOH organizers, said no and turned the mayor's offer down. Negotiations continued, and then a division of the Ancient Order of Hibernians in Manhattan, Division 7 of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, then offered and extended an invitation to ILGO to actually join them as their guests, but without our ILGO banner. That's where the banner issue came in. Then Mayor David Dinkins offered, the mayor is always leads the Irish St. Patrick's Parade. This was the first time the African-American mayor of the city of New York, Mayor David Dinkins, decided that he would stand and walk with the Irish Lesbian and Gay organization, most of us immigrants at the time. And he said, I will be your banner. And I'm here, by the way, marching with Robert Riger, then a leading activist with ACT UP. Robert, who grew up in Astoria, Queens, his father a traditional Irish musician, his mother an immigrant from Borough County, Offaly, and he literally took me by the hand and carried me up the avenue that day. By the way, you can see I didn't know how to dress for that parade. I knew, for all of us, to be honest with you, we knew that this was going to be a day that would change our lives, that this was different than stepping into the Pride Parade or heading out with our friends down in the village or at a bar or going out. This was the day that really we risked so much. It was like our day of coming out. So many of us were not even out to our families back home. And so it was quite the profound experience and moment. And and I'll just say as well, every single person who marched in that parade has their own story and journey that was very deep and very profound. All right.
Yeah, that's something that I've realized in my research, is that, you know, every single perspective has something so unique to offer about what it was like that day, and then the years that followed, right? So after that first parade, ILGO was officially banned from the next year, and it began a decade of legal battles, civil disobedience, and protests. And then in 1994, you decided to start Lavender and Green Alliance, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. So I just wanted to know a little bit about why did you decide to create Lavender and Green Alliance, and what was that organization like in the early years?
Sure. By the way, all right. So very quickly, here we are, March 16. We were booed, we were screened, called faggots. People threw cans of beer at the mayor, and that was quite frightening. Other people blew kisses and cheered us and extended a welcome. By the way, I acknowledge Anne Maguire and Paula Dwyer, who represented ILGO at City Hall, and the mayor saying, I will be your banner. On March 17, by the way, that parade was on a Saturday. When the March 17 is on a Sunday, the parade organizers always move the parade to the Saturday so we don't miss mass. And the next day, ILGO said, let's gather in Sheridan Square to celebrate. And the mayor joined us, and Robert Riger's father played the music, and here we are literally dancing to Irish music with Mayor David Dinkins, and that was a beautiful moment, almost a counter experience day before. Next slide there. What do I have? Oh yeah, all right, some of the follow-up. This is a little bit more personal. It's right. At the time, I was a teacher in the Catholic school in Jamaica, Queens. And by the way, I tried to explain, I was already out to the principal who hired me. and they were kind of very supportive, but this was different. I told them that I could not go against my conscience and stand on the sidewalk while my own people were going through this historic experience. And it would be hypocritical of me, since I was teaching classes on justice and ethics in the girls' school. So eventually I got a letter in April terminating my job. Jim Dwyer of Newsday said I was fired after 3 years of teaching and a parade. The case, interestingly, was brought before the City Human Rights Commission, and that was through a great lesbian lawyer of our community, Terry McGovern. And okay, the next slide there. Yep, as Emma just said, actually in 1993, hundreds of members of ILGO, our family and friends, were arrested, and this led to years of protests and arrests. And here I am, actually, with Turlough McNeill from Belfast, a great activist. I have to tell you, I was petrified. I was learning, and you can see as well over the tricolour Irish sash, and we were conscious of AIDS and ACT UP activism. I think for me, and everybody has their own personal experience, for me, I had a sense of being to so many funerals that now I tell people life is short. And back then, I had a sense that gay life is even shorter. And we cannot put off to tomorrow what we need to do today. And so there was so much. This was so much more than just a parade. And this news clipping tells the story in 1993, how I was represented, among others, by William Consular, you know, the famous sort of civil rights lawyer in New York City. And this is all about how we refused to, you know, we fought the case, went to trial. And I actually say that already by then, gays and lesbians were marching in Cork and Drogheda and Dublin in the St. Patrick's Parade, inspired by the movement in New York. I said the arrest, yeah, oh yeah, this is Dignity that I was part of. And Dignity became great supporters of ILGO, of Lavender and Green, and the St. Pat's for All Parade. And I learned a lot from Dignity as well. This is Father Dan McCarthy out in front, who's Irish, who was with ILGO every single year, was arrested, and wrote to newspapers, and as a openly gay Catholic priest who was Irish American. And again, there's some of those other stories. The woman beside Dan McCarthy there is Barbara Moore, Irish, who she always wore a button that said straight but not narrow. So this movement involved our family, our friends, people who cared for us, who understood, who got it. And Barbara would become a great leader of St. Pat's for All in Queens and with Lavender and Green.
Yeah, Brendan, in the interest of time, maybe we can just skip ahead a little bit, and we could talk a little bit about creating St. Pat's for All, because I definitely want to get to that, because I think it's such an important part of the story. And then, of course, Lavender and Green Alliance,
all right,
who are instrumental along the way.
Absolutely. Lavender and Green Alliance, that was formed in March 22nd, 1994. And that was a little bit about pushing cultural issues. People said they wanted to learn Irish language, Irish LGBT history, dance. And it was pretty depressing, getting arrested every year, you know, and I said, let's create spaces where we can celebrate our culture as well. And so we began to organize what we called Ihe Éireach, which means gay dance or a gay night, and to have awards, even in the name of Irish LGBT figures. Roger Casement, Eva Gorboot Leadership Award. By the way, when we would do the dinner dance, you know the way people have, you're at table number 1, table number 2, 3, 4. At our dinner dances, what we used to do was name a table after a historic Irish lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender figure. And that's what we did. First dance, somebody had put shamrocks and leprechauns up on the wall. They wanted help with the decorating. A little side note, I ran around they got it, because I arrived with literally posters of people from our culture and to celebrate that. We also began a film series, Silence the Speech. All right. Yeah, and I'm going to move quickly. Stonewall 24, June 24. There was a call put out for, it was this great museum project, an idea. It was called Windows on Gay Life, and people were invited, community groups, to suggest projects for a window. And so we at Lavender and Green, myself and Peter Hendrick, who's artist, designed this one, and it was all about reclaiming our heritage, reclaiming our story, both Irish and Irish America. And so it was so great to see this in McNulty's coffee shop there on Christopher Street during the Stonewall celebration in June 1994.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yep. This is Dihe Éireach, our dancing. Stanley Ryger, Robert Ryger's father. Robert died in January 94. And that's when we said we need to dance more, you know? And so I put in that quote, which I always love, from Samuel Beckett: dance first, think later, it's the natural order. And our first dance was actually in April 95, and we dedicated to the memory of Robert. And yeah, there we go. And always have the music.
Mm-hmm.
Next. Yeah, these are some of the people who would come. I call them the mothers of our movement. This is Jean Manford, the founder of PFLAG, who was a regular, of course, who was from Flushing, Queens, and she's there. In the middle is Danny Drum's mother. And you can see on the table there in between the women are green carnations. Of course, designed by Oscar Wilde, and always worn on St. Patrick's Day. And we would tell people how our great Oscar Wilde conceived, designed the green carnations, and we would have them on every table. And you can see photographs. There's Roger Casement and others on the wall there in our decorations. Okay. Yeah, this is our awards. This is our Ihe Éireach. Oh yeah, this is a story from 99, when, believe it or not, the Bronx St. Patrick's Parade called us and said, "You're welcome to march." When it was announced in the Irish Echo and the Irish Voice that Lavender and Green Alliance had been invited to march in a St. Patrick's Parade in the Bronx, they called us and they said they withdrew the welcome. And because all these other groups, Ancient Order of Hibernians, Catholic parishes, said they wouldn't march in a parade with Lavender and Green Alliance, so the welcome was turned away. All right, the next one, next slide there. Thanks very much. So what happened in the Bronx in 99? There was great excitement in our group that we were being welcomed to march with our banner in the Bronx St. Patrick's Parade. And then within days, that welcome was withdrawn. I always told our crowd and suggested it's always a yes until it's no. So we actually went up on the day of the parade, pleading for inclusion and, you know, talking with people, trying to reconcile. And already it become a big news story. And instead, we ended up getting arrested in 99 in the Bronx. Then there's Fifth Avenue was after that. And then in Brooklyn, the next slide, I think, has a picture or two from Brooklyn. Yeah, here we are. So this is in Brooklyn. Members of Lavender and Green Alliance arrested at the Park Slope St. Patrick's Parade. And our whole idea was there must be one St. Patrick's Parade that will extend a welcome, that will allow us to be with our banner. By the way, we were always told you can march but without a banner, which of course means you're welcome as long as you're invisible. Do not bring yourself. And for us, we always said, everybody else can bring their banners. We want to. This is who we are. So here we are. By the way, this is Jimmy Nulty, and this is on the other side, getting in the van, is Alan Fleischman, who is such an amazing gay community activist in Brooklyn and in democratic circles, died a couple of years ago, and also worked in City Hall at the city controller's office. And he wrote to all of the politicians in Brooklyn, and that's all that kind of organizing of this movement. So many people in our community got this issue and became part of this movement. So, all right, the next one there. Then in 99, we had all the court hearings for Lavender and Green, the final one being in August, and our case was dismissed. And basically, I spoke with a couple of friends, with Jesus Debron, I came home and spoke to my now spouse, Tom, and I said, we've been arrested and excluded everywhere, in every borough, in every St. Patrick's Parade, we've been told we don't belong. And I said, I am going to apply to the New York City Police Department and create a parade that would be known for its spirit of welcome and hospitality. And I said, in fact, we'll literally come up with a name, that our name will reflect who we are, and we called it St. Pat's for All. And so I tell people, out of our experience of discrimination and exclusion, we created a movement of welcome and hospitality. By the way, of course, and everyone knows that this issue went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. It was there were so many court hearings around this issue that all basically agreed that parades are, what's the word? First Amendment, freedom.
They're like protected speech.
Right,
and freedom of
protected
religion.
speech. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and therefore more or less affirming that people have a right to exclude whomsoever they wish, even if it's not morally right, which I always said. And I said, well, St. Pat's for All will express our speech, and our speech will be, I used to say, we will err on the side of hospitality. And yeah, Newsday called it a historic breakthrough. It was in Sunnyside, Woodside. Like, very quickly, a couple of the stories. Nights before, there was huge opposition to this, and yet people. Father Michael Judge wrote one of the first checks. He told us to keep it a secret, not to tell his superiors to whom he was supposed to hand over all the money. Malachy McCourt, beloved Malachy McCourt, who was such a great supporter of our LGBT movement and a great ally, and came to every parade from St. Pat's for All to marching with Lavender Green and on Fifth Avenue. But that year, the extraordinary thing was we had no stage, no money, very little. And next, all of a sudden, a couple of weeks before the parade, we get a call from the White House. Hello, Brendan. This is the White House. The First Lady Hillary Clinton would like to march in the parade in New York, in Sunnyside and Woodside. And they want to know about our stage and our sound system. And of course, I'd said, wait, now we've no stage, we'd no sound system. But the great thing with Hillary Clinton, I have to be honest with you, we became news, front page news, not only all over the US, all over the world. And of course, Father Michael Judge came. I'd reached out to the chaplains to the Irish community, paid by the Irish government, by the way, to see would they do a blessing before the parade. And they all said they could not do a blessing for a parade that it would include, LGBT groups like Lavender and Green Alliance. So then I spoke with a representative of the Choctaw Nation. And this was the Native American tribe from Oklahoma who reached out to the Irish during the famine. And I said, we would love to have you be part of our parade. And he said, how's it going? I said, well, I just got off with the chaplain to the Irish community who's unable to give us a blessing. And he said, how about a Choctaw blessing? And I said, wow, that's amazing. So, in fact, New York City's first inclusive St. Patrick's Parade opened up with a blessing from the Choctaw. And our friends from the Catholic Worker joined us. Our theme was from the 1916 proclamation, that phrase, cherishing all the children of the nation equally. And by the way, this lovely picture just There's Hillary Clinton. Beside Hillary Clinton is Danny Drum, then a teacher and organizer of the Pride Parade in Queens. And that's where Danny brought a lot, and his Queens Pride team brought all the practicalities of running a parade. Beside me is Ellen Duncan, who was a great organizer in the labor movement. She was working as a nurse, was a great labor and union leader in the city, and literally organized for months. It took a lot of organizing. Anyway, and then there's some of the young people from our community as well. All right, next. Oh, this is a small little video. It's just a minute, about a minute and a half. We'll see if.
Everyone is Irish on St. Patrick's Day, or so the saying goes. But at today's New York City parade, gays were pointedly unwelcome.
About 500 ILGO members gathered at 42nd Street at 9 o'clock, but they only got as far as 43rd.
I'm walking over towards the demonstrators now. Maybe you can listen for a minute.
Hello, good man. Can I put up a little sign? It's for St. Patrick's Parade. When they take it down in the morning, at least they'll have a quick read of it. We have a parade. Everybody's welcome.
Well, once again, Brendan Fay is with us, and we're speaking about a great parade.
My name is Brendan Fay, and I organised St. Pat's for All Parade. Every community has its moment on the avenue. People said this would be impossible, and besides, it would never last.
He's been wounded himself by bigotry and discrimination.
It sends a message that you can have an inclusive St. Patrick's Day parade and everybody can march together.
We need celebration. We need our cultural events to become more welcoming.
Well, Brendan, I find the kind of distinction between the ILGO, the rest and it's very high, and then just the joy of the St. Pat's Parade. I find that so incredible. And I want to give the people in the chat a chance to ask questions. So I'm going to finish by just asking like one final question. If you could just answer it in like a minute or two. Over your decades as an activist, what have you learned about being an activist? And how do you think, the future generations like me can take those lessons and use them?
Oh, that's great. Look, first of all, there's, I would say it's almost like there's some huge steps in our journey as LGBT people. And one is, first of all, just coming out and feeling that you belong in the human family and you have a right to be yourself and you don't have to leave pieces of yourself at the door and so that's one. That was huge. And I often tell people I've been arrested many times, but the great risk and courage that it takes for people who go back to their families, back to their communities, wherever they are, and take that risk of being themselves and coming out is still huge. So that's activism. Two, that activism, people often say he's an activist or she's an activist or they are activists. And I always say, if anything I've learned from our community is an invitation for all of us to become activists on our own behalf and together. And how important that is. Look, in Ireland, I was reading about the community over here. So we know that there's, in Ireland we used to say, think globally, act locally, but that we impact one another, and the importance of activism and everybody being invited to being an activism, to being an activist. And that means work and organizing. And I think there's no other community that have transformed culture and lives and communities and laws and history than our LGBT community. And I'm very proud of ILGO, of Lavender Green, of St. Pat's for All. I describe them as a movement of people just rising up together and working for change. And when you think about it, it took us, by the way, maybe we'll just move very quickly, just one or two more slides, just to see where did this all, okay, one more or two. Let me see. We'll move on.
To the 2016 parade.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we'll skip this. Skip this somewhere. Yeah, we'll move to 20.
All great things.
Yeah, there we are in the snow. And here we are. This was the huge day. This was 2016 after 25 years. And look at this. Here we are. Like the feelings, it's very different. We'd gone from being arrested and protesting, but this was 25 years of struggle. And it was such a day of joy, of history, of hospitality. And you can see some notable people there. There's Edie Windsor, who'd become really part. There's Malachy McCourt in his wheelchair. There's members of ILGO, Irish Queers, the wider Irish diaspora community, the New York LGBT community. We're all there together. Robert Riger's family. It was an incredible day, and I was so proud. We're all behind this banner, Lavender and Green the Lines, Muintir Éireach na hÉireann in our language, celebrating Irish, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender culture and identity. It was really, really great. And the last one, and then we'll, the last slide, yeah, one more. And here we are on the Avenue, Broad Pride. So we continue, and I always say, now we have our place on the Avenue. We already got a notice about marching this year. By the way, we marched in the Bronx Parade, the Staten Island Parade. This time, this was the first year, and Brooklyn. So all St. Patrick's parades practically around the city now. We march in every borough. Now I always say our activism is holding the space for the coming generations and to show up for ourselves and each other, so that it's not just about protesting against something, it's protesting for something, for visibility, for raising awareness, and just the joy of being alive and being yourself and celebrating the culture. There's nothing kind of too profound or deep about it, other than the joy of simply celebrating your culture and being yourself. And I'm so grateful. By the way, I often said to people, and Emma, you hinted at this, that our pride parades are often the first spaces where we have this experience of belonging to a wider community and movement. And this, like Lavender and Green Alliance, you did it. It took a bit longer than we expected, but the main point is getting there and celebrating, dancing, and being together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is pretty profound, Brendan. And I'm just so grateful that I get to have these conversations with you and we get to talk about all this incredible work that you and everyone in this story has done to really create a space for queer Irish people in New York today.
Thank you. Can I just say, one of the things we do is, and it's an Irish thing as well, to remember. And I think I learned that from our queer community as well. You know, the way even in the middle of our disco and our dancing and all of that, that at every one of our parades, we pause. It's like this moment of silence and remembering those who we have lost, those who died too soon, those who've gone before us. It's just like we still have place in our hearts. And so in a way, in our Lavender and Green Alliance, when we march, now we carry their images, and it's very beautiful. So Robert and everybody else. So anybody out there that would like to join us, they're very, very welcome. They can just get in touch and be part of this and even help organize.
Yeah, I mean, count me there next year.
Thank you. It's great fun, and we need everybody, of course. It's a great story, and we're working on films, and yeah, I'm so
much great work.
Yeah,
I think we have a couple minutes for questions if anyone wants to put any questions in the chat.
If anyone has questions or memories of marching in either of these parades or any of these parades. We have someone who had to leave but said that she marches in St. Pat's for All every year since immigrating to New York City from Ire, only 2 years to be fair. And so thank you, Brendan. for that.
Yeah, and if you're New York City local, I would definitely go to the St. Pat's Bell Parade. It's a lot of fun. It's like there's like a million dogs. Everyone brings their dog to the parade, and you just get to see all these incredible cultural groups, dancers, musicians. It's a lot of fun.
Yep.
Emma, it's Ken. How are you? I just want to comment on the parade organization that you were talking about earlier about the St. Patrick's Day parade and how rigid it was and order and dress code, which some of the people on this Zoom may know about the original reminder days that were organized in Philadelphia in front of Independence Hall, where people attending had to wear suits or blazers, and women had to wear, dresses or skirts. So, and the signs were organized in a certain way. So it's very similar to that.
Yeah, I find the idea of respectability very interesting and how people harness those ideas of,
Mhm.
the power of looking respectable is something that can be like very empowering and also exclusive, right? Those hidden codes of what it means to look right, dress right, act right. Yeah, not to get too philosophical, but it's a way of power, right? Of the way you look can change how people think about you.
I'm curious, since we are a site-based history project, how Emma and Brendan and anyone on the Zoom feel about the locations where, now that there's a history to the Queen's March, what does that mean to the neighborhood? What does it mean to the streetscape? What does it mean to individuals who are marching there?
So I mean, for me, I mean, I live in Woodside, so I'm walking down, I walk down Skillman all the time, gonna go pick up my co-op box there tomorrow. And so it feels like, when I was a teenager, I would travel into the city. I'm from Philadelphia originally, to go to Pride, and I'm like, this is where the queer people are. And now the fact I'm like in my neighborhood, right? I see this incredible visibility and I'm reminded like I belong here, right? I am part of this community. I can feel safe expressing myself, right? And I think that kind of embodiment of like, oh, like this is, my community accepts me for who I am and I'm allowed to be who I am is so powerful.
I would say that it took a while for businesses in Sunnyside and Woodside. There was a lot of opposition. There was posters all over Sunnyside and Woodside the first year saying Hillary and the sodomites are coming to town, protect your children, people with whistles. One year somebody slashed our balloon arch, and so it was a journey in pushing against discrimination, prejudice, ignorance. And it means to me like being persistent, finding joy together, creating bonds of closeness with one another. I would hear from friends of Lavender Green like Maya, who is a leader also in our transgender circles, as well as being organizing in Lavender Green Alliance. And we hear the rhetoric still today. There are so many laws out there, and that's why we have to show up, to be visible, to have the courage to be visible, to organize. I'm so grateful for scholars like Emma, who she could choose from so many topics and subjects. A, that she is out. Number two, that she is willing to do the work of the scholarship on our stories and our history, and how important that is. I'm grateful for for the people who do that work as well. And but Queens was huge. It really was a great breakthrough. And the issue that had gone all the way to the Supreme Court, and it was, I always say, by the way, no people, no parade. The people of Sunnyside and Woodside, said yes. The Irish dance schools said, yes, we will do this. And children's groups, the Catholic worker said yes. And people with disabilities in their wheelchairs came and were up front. And that's what it takes. That's why I always say, I will never be jaded and will show up at every parade as long as I'm able, because somebody is watching and it might be their first parade and how important it is.
I was wondering about, you talked about Brooklyn and the Bronx, and of course earlier this year on Staten Island, there was an alternate march, St. Patrick's Day. If you could talk about that a little, because the way it was reported, it kind of seemed like the St. Patrick's Day on Staten Island, the main one, allowed LGBTQ groups, but that was not the case. I was curious if you could touch on that a bit if you were there. I'm sure you were there.
Oh yeah, I'd gone to Staten Island for many years, and pleaded with the organizers of that parade, and it was like talking to the wall, and it's profound wall of ignorance and prejudice. But I also learned that who is funding these parades? Parades take money. Our city taxpayer dollars were actually going to support. So it meant going to politicians, speaking with people, and be willing to tell our stories. And that's all of that work and organizing and saying prejudice is not right, is wrong. It hurts. I always say homophobia hurts not just, or transphobia does not just hurt our LGBT people to whom it's directed, but impacts all of us and diminishes our celebrations. But I must say, creative business people on Staten Island said, look, we will organize a parade, a St. Patrick's parade, so that Staten Island can have a St. Patrick's parade that will welcome the LGBT community. And that's a bit of like creativity and imagination, and and they did it, and the response of people on Staten Island was huge. So next March will be interesting, and so we'll see. And of course, look, it took us a while. Already we got the invitation for Lavender Green to march in the 2025 Bronx St. Patrick's Parade. Like, people change. And where did that change come from? Our people who were willing to come out, risk, challenge, and do that work. And then people say, our parades are a lot more fun with everybody. And I always say we should be working at making our cultural celebrations everywhere, every cultural celebration, more inclusive, more welcoming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, you did a sweet comment from Tracy Quinn.
Mom.
Yeah.
Good to have all here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Emma and Brendan, for this 25-year journey and then some of marching. Lots to go. We were saying before the call, there's so much to cover in such a short period of time. So many people, so many groups, so many aspects of this history. So it was nice to get a snapshot of what it was, of all that and what it was like, and just the incredible, just back then in the 90s, especially hearing all the boos and all that, and just, I don't know, I feel like it takes guts to be able to do what you did. So
yeah, thanks very much. And anybody listening or tuning in, join us, be part of us, get in touch, and we'd love to have you join us and organize. We're organizing an exhibit to celebrate our Lavender Green 30th anniversary, and we've a couple of film projects, but and we'll have an Iha Éireach, so come and dance with us, celebrate with us, be part of this. And thanks very much for taking out the time this evening. And once again, thank you very much.
We have a comment here. Brendan, you have been my hero for years. Michael, let's see.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you both, and happy LGBTQ History Month to everyone. We're ending the month with this talk. So Thank you so much. And as Ken mentioned in the chat, I hope you'll check us out at nyclgbtsites.org, all of the historic sites that we've documented around the city, and to follow us on social media at nyclgbtsites. And if you have ideas for historic sites that you think we should remember on our website, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And also, I hope we hope you join us for our next 2 programs in November and December.
And I just want to shout out and not embarrass her to Deborah Adele from the co-founder of the Lesbian Her Story Archive. I just didn't want to end the evening without thanking her publicly for what she started years and years ago with her colleagues. It's such an important resource. So thanks.
Thank you. Oh, Kelsey Gallagher, thank you for sharing your story. Love this talk and getting to learn a bit about Irish and queer histories. Yes, thank you all for attending. This will also be available on YouTube within a couple of weeks or so. So if you know people who were not able to attend, we will have it on our YouTube channel.
Brendan and Emma, another founder of the LGBT project. Thanks for a great talk. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad you were there, Jay. I wasn't sure if you were.
Yeah.
I saw that you signed up. I didn't know that.
Well, here I am.
Yeah.
Brendan, I want to thank you in particular for giving such a tribute to Mayor Dinkins. His role in that was really amazing. And, you know, he suffered so much racism from the city of New York when he was mayor.
Yes, he did, you know, and, you know, actually, Jason, I'll just wrap up with one last word from Mayor David Dinkins back in 1991 when he said, he wrote this letter to people about what happened. He said, "As I stated, we must not flinch from our responsibility ever to widen the circle of tolerance. I would rather be booed in a parade than bow down to the forces of exclusion, fear, and intolerance. I've always believed this truth to be self-evident. The St. Patrick's Parade was not a new experience." And then he talks about ILGO, but his last paragraph says, "Unless we all work together to put an end to discrimination based on race, religious faith, national origin, age, physical ability, and sexual orientation, the future of our city will be bleak. By working together to fight discrimination against some of us, we will improve the quality of life for all of us." David Dinkins. He was amazing that year. Yeah, thanks, Jay.
And quite a contrast to Madison Square Garden.
Yes. Oh, yes.
On that note, all of you are voting.
Vote, organize, yeah.
In case you haven't heard, there's an election next week. Be sure to vote.
Vote and organize friends and family. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.